thank you for visiting my YouTube channel. I know you want to watch the video. Before I get into the content, I'm going to talk about my nonprofit, the Accelerated Training Program, a cybersecurity and digital literacy nonprofit based in Charlotte, North Carolina. We are looking to provide accessible cybersecurity education and digital literacy skills to underrepresented groups from the K through 12 space right now, but we have on our roadmap collegiate, elderly populations, etc. Pretty much anyone from an underrepresented group. We want them to get cybersecurity education and digital literacy skills to bring them into the ever increasing digital world that we live in now. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, we do have a donate button if you would like to donate monetarily. We're always accepting donations. If you would like to volunteer your time, we have a volunteer tab where we're looking for workshop volunteers. Currently, we have 1 month workshops, but we're looking to expand that in 2024. Board members, advisory board members, and a grant writer. So if you're a grant writer, if you have experience in grant writing and also winning grants, we would definitely love to have you on our team. To be considered, please complete the volunteer form here, which is a link that will navigate you to a Google form. And again, we're a cybersecurity, digital literacy nonprofit, and we would love to work with you if that is your passion as well. Thank you. Have a good day. And now the video is going to start. Hello, and welcome to the latest video for Advent of Cyber 2023. I am caught up now, so we're on day 22. Today is the 22nd day of December. We're 3 days away from Christmas. So we're doing SSRF, server-side request forgery, Jingle your SSRF bills, a Mary command, and control Hackventure. So let's start the machine. Let me start the attack box because I think I'm going to need that too. Okay. Now, let's go. As the elves tried to recover the compromised servers, McSkitty's SOC team identified abnormal activity and noticed that a massive amount of data is being sent to an unknown server. This was already identified on day 9. An insider has likely created a malicious backdoor. McSkitty has contacted Detective Frostow from law enforcement to help them. Can you assist Detective Frostow in taking down the command and control server? So the learning objectives: understanding server-side request forgery, which different types of server-side request forgery are used to exploit the vulnerability, prerequisites for exploiting the vulnerability, how the attack works, how to exploit the vulnerability, and mitigation measures for protection. So what is SSRF? Server-side request forgery is a security vulnerability that occurs when an attacker tricks a web application into making unauthorized requests to internal or external resources on the server's behalf. This can allow an attacker to interact with internal systems, potentially leading to data exposure or unauthorized actions. Leaving web applications vulnerable to server-side request forgery can have profound security implications, potentially leading to unauthorized access to internal systems, remote code execution, data breaches, or the application being further compromised. So the different types of SSRF attacks. There's basic. So in the basic server-side request forgery attack, the attacker sends a crafted request from the vulnerable server to internal or external resources. For example, they might attempt to access files on the local file system, internal services, or databases that are not intended to be publicly accessible. Blind SSRF. In a blind SSRF attack, the attacker doesn't directly see the response to the request. Instead, they may infer information about the internal network by measuring the time it takes for the server to respond or observing error message changes. Okay. Semi-blind server-side request forgery. The attacker does not receive direct response in their browser or application. However, they rely on indirect clues, side channel information, or observable effects within the application to determine the success or failure of their SSRF requests. This might involve monitoring changes in application behavior, response time, error messages, or other signs. So, prerequisite for exploitation: vulnerable input points. Web applications must have input fields susceptible to manipulation, such as URLs or file upload functionalities. Lack of input validation. The application should have adequate input validation or effective sanitization mechanisms, allowing an attacker to craft malicious requests. Okay, so how does server-side request forgery work? Identifying vulnerable input. The attacker locates an input field within the application that can be manipulated to trigger server-side requests. This could be a URL parameter in a web form, an API endpoint, or request parameter input such as the referrer. Manipulating the input. The attacker inputs a malicious URL or other payloads that cause the application to make unintended requests. This input could be a URL pointing to an internal server, a loopback address, or an external server under the attacker's control. Requesting unauthorized resources. The application server, unaware of the malicious input, makes a request to the specified URL or resource. This request could target internal resources, sensitive services, or external systems. Exploiting the response. Depending on the application's behavior and the attacker's payload, the response from the malicious request may provide valuable information such as internal server data, credentials, system credentials information, or pathways for further exploitation. So, a disclaimer. Hacking a command and control server is ethically unacceptable and illegal. Any suspected C2 activity should be reported to the appropriate incident response team for investigation and mitigation. This knowledge is provided solely for educational purposes. Okay? Meaning you should not just be hacking targets without written permission. Detective Frosto checked the C2 against known vulnerabilities, but none worked. He decided to give SSRF a shot. Now that we know how the SSRF works, can you help Detective Frosto take down the C2 server? Okay, so we're going to need the attack box in the VM. Okay, now we need to add the host. So what is okay? So nano Etsy host. Oh. Nano Etsy host. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add our IP 10.10.137.71, and we're going to add it to MacGreedy secret c2.thm. We're going to save that. Okay. Yep. So, yep, that's exactly what I did. Okay, so we went to Etsy host. We added a new line. So, pretty much what this is saying, what Etsy host is saying is instead of typing the IP address of 10.10.137.71, when we start our web browser, all we have to type in is the MacGreedy secret C2. It's a translation. So it's saying, hey, whenever you see MacGreedy secret C2.thm, map it to the IP address of 10.10, what we have. Okay? So HTTP MacGreedy secret c2.thm. Okay? And it works because now we got it. Okay, identifying vulnerable input. Once we visit the URL for the command and control server, we'll see that it's protected by a login panel. McSkitty's pen tester team have launched different types of automated and manual scans to gain access, but all was in vain. For a target to be exploitable through server-side request forgery, we need to use some vulnerable input to forge the request to the server. Sometimes these requests can be found through scanning, viewing source code, or other documentation logs. So manipulating the input. McSkitty noticed a link to the documentation at the bottom of the page. Once we click on the URL, it directs us. I'm going to open it in a new tab. It redirects us to the endpoints API. Now that we have some URLs, we could try SSRF attacks against them. So this is what it says. How can I access the API? You just need to visit the endpoint, machine IP, get client data, PHP, and then we're passing in a URL. So for example, if our client is 10.10.10.10 or and our machine is 10.10.10.20, we could say HTTP 10.10.10.20 get client data.php, and we're getting the file message.doc from 10.10.10.10. So how many requests can you make in a minute? There's no limit. Is there an API or protocol whitelisting? No, they currently don't have whitelisting, but you could use protocols like HTTP, file, and FTP. That's going to be important. What is the file name that contains all the important credentials? Config PHP is a file that contains default credentials for the dashboard. Okay, so requesting the unauthorized resource, we could see that one of the endpoints is 10.10.137.71, which is my IP. Get client PHP URL, and then what we want. Takes a URL as a parameter if an infected agent URL is provided to it. It will fetch all files from the infected agent. But what if we change the URL parameter to a different IP and try to access another file? Okay. Exploiting the resource. We notice that if we change the URL parameter to any other file on the host, we could fetch the file like so, which will fetch the index.php. And this is, okay, so let's, okay. Okay, so you see we have it. So we're trying to see if it's hello. Okay. Nay, because you could do internal and external. Okay. So is SSRF the process in which the attacker tricks the server into loading only external? That's nay. You could load internal and external. Okay. So now we're looking and it says, so now we have literally loaded the index.php, and we see that the username and password is hello. So, but this isn't what we're looking for. Remember, it says it's config, right? That has the default. So let's go to config. Okay, McGreedy, and then that. So we have essentially loaded the config. So what is the username? Is McGreedy. Okay. So now if we log in, and you see I'm kind of doing this out of order. Okay, so if we say McGreedy, oh, okay, don't save. Okay, now what version is this? Can I move this? So I'm gonna open this because I don't. No, that's not what I wanted. Okay. Okay. 1.1 because I couldn't see it. Oh, 1.1. I couldn't see it due to this being in my way. Okay. What is the flag? Okay, so here's the flag. Okay, what is the flag value after stopping the data exfiltration on McSkitty's computer? So action, I'm going to say remove. Okay. Okay. So if you enjoyed this task, feel free to complete the SSRF room. Okay, now let's go back. Okay, so the file scheme, when using the URL, typically references local files on a computer or file system. For example, a URL like file paths to any file is often used to access a file located on your local file system. Usually, an attacker can access sensitive files like etc password, a connection strings in config.php or connection.php to take control of the C2 panel. We could get the C2 panel's credentials by accessing the file containing the password. Then we could log in successfully to the C2 panel. Mitigation measures. To prevent SSRF exploitation, the following mitigations are suggested: employing strict input validation and sanitization to prevent malicious input, using allow lists to control which domains and IPs the application can access, applying network segmentation to restrict requests to authorized resources, following the principle of least privilege, granting the minimum permissions required for systems operation. Okay, so we essentially solved the room. So just to recap, the first answer was nay, because you could use server-side request forgery for internal and external, not just external. Okay, from there, we used the file parameter and we opened the config.php file because inside of the API documentation, the config.php file has the default credentials for the dashboard. And so we see the username is McGreedy and the password is this. Next, we logged in. And from there, we saw the flag exploited. So that was the flag after we got into the C2 panel. The version number is down here. That was 1.1. Next, the final step was to remove McSkitty. So McSkitty was number 1, and I pressed removed. So now he's gone, and then it gave us the last flag. So just again to recap, SSRF worked because we were able to use that vulnerability to access an internal file, the config.php file. We should not be able to open that file, but we were able to trick the server into using the file parameter to access the file on that server. So that was how we were able to exploit it. Again, need to make sure that input is sanitized and validated. You should never trust any input from the user. Network segmentation and least privilege, meaning I bet that file is probably is permissive, meaning it has too much permissions. So employing least privilege is, hey, if I am the owner of the file, I can read, write, execute. If I am in the group, I can read the file. And if I'm none of these, then I shouldn't be able to open the file at all. So that's an example of least privilege. So again, I hope you learned something in this video. I can't wait to see you in the next one. We are 3 days away from Christmas, and I can't wait to see what other tasks we have in store. Have a good day. Bye.